In this article, Silberner showed that capitalism began as a French word, coined in the 1850 edition of a famous pamphlet by the French socialist Louis Blanc entitled Organisation du Travail, or The Organisation of Labour, as the English language translation was entitled. Although Silberner did not explain why Blanc began to use the term, or what he intended it to mean, he did, however, single out the fact that, in coining the word, Louis Blanc made a point of juxtaposing capitalism to capital. "Cry out," Blanc wrote, "long live capital! Long may we applaud it, and long may we go on to attack capitalism, its mortal enemy, with even more intensity. Long live the goose that lays the golden egg, and long may we protect it from anyone seeking to eviscerate it." It is not usual now to think of capital and capitalism as mortal enemies. One of the further aims of this book is to try to show what this meant, and begin to explain why the conceptual opposition on which it was based has come to look so strange. The initial reason for both can, however, be set out briefly here. This is the fact that Silberner's discovery was not entirely accurate because, long before Louis Blanc made use of the term in 1850, both the word and the concept of capitalism were initially associated with the related subjects of power politics, war finance, and public debt. The word capitalist actually began as an 18th century French word, capitaliste, that was usually applied to someone who lent money to one or other of the many branches of the French royal government to fund the costs of war. The original English language equivalent of a capitaliste was, therefore, an annuitant or a stockholder, rather than a capitalist. The English word came later. As will be shown in later chapters, the opposition between capital and capitalism on which Louis Blanc drew was bound up with this earlier usage. Gradually, however, the earlier usage also came to be bound up with a number of other clusters of concepts, values, and ideologies that, cumulatively and sequentially, came to form the moral and political context in which both the word and the concept of capitalism first arose. Some were connected to the subjects of property, inequality, and what came to be called the social question. Others were connected to the subjects of industry, the division of labour, and global trade. Still others, however, continued to be connected to the subjects of money, credit, and public debt. From the vantage point of 18th century usage, however, capitalism did not have to wait for the publication of the Communist Manifesto to acquire the apocalyptic aura that it still can have. The aura was there right from the start. One reason why this aura has lasted is that alongside the concept of capitalism, there was another concept with a rather different set of connotations. This was the concept of commercial society. It had rather less to do with the subjects of war and debt that, as will be shown, formed the original context in which the concept of capitalism first appeared, because the concept of commercial society was associated instead with the subject of the division of labour. Over the course of the 19th century, however, the two concepts began to merge. Discussions of capitalism in the context of the subjects of war and debt sometimes gave rise to predictions of either the end and dissolution of established political societies or the establishment of a universal empire under the aegis of a powerful and determined royal or republican government. Discussions of capitalism in the context of the subject of the division of labour also gave rise to predictions of either the end and dissolution of established political societies or the establishment of a domestic political empire, this time under the aegis of a new incarnation of a Roman Caesar, as the combined effects of economic inequality and social isolation took their toll. The modern concept of revolution encompassed them both. The fusion gave an extra charge to the title of Marx's most famous publication, the Communist Manifesto, because a manifesto was, originally, the name reserved for a declaration of war. Quite a number of steps are required to explain how the subject of the division of labour came to be associated with the subjects of war and debt, and, by extension, class war. One of the initial aims of this book is to describe how these steps occurred, because several of them have now been forgotten. In the 21st century, the concepts of capitalism, commercial society, and the division of labour are usually associated with the economic and political thought of Adam Smith. In the early 19th century, however, the concepts of commercial society and the division of labour were associated as readily with the thought of a now much less well-known French royalist writer named Louis de Bonald. The Communist Manifesto